Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So 2 days ago, I released my grading every single Western Conference general manager's tenure thus far video, and it turned into like a 25-minute video. It was way longer than I anticipated, but I wanted to be thorough about it, so I've decided to split the Eastern Conference into divisions so we can have nice, digestible, around 15 minutes. Watch this video still be like 20 minutes. 15-minute videos on the Metro Division, in the Atlantic Division, and I thought we'd start out with the Metro Division. These guys have been on the job for a decent amount. Some of these guys a long time. Some of the guys are more recent, especially Kyle Dubas. But we're going to go through these guys. I am going to grade them based on their full tenure, how good I think they have been as general managers for their respective clubs. And up first, I'm going to go with Lou Lamoriello. I am going to go with an A-. Oh my God, Mike, you always talk down about Lou Lamoriello. You're usually pessimistic when objectively looking at since he came in compared to what the state of the franchise was before then. He has been a massive success. I've always said that about Lou Lamoriello. Yes, are we going to be dog shit in 5 years? 1,000%. But this run under the Lou Lamoriello administration, I'm saying that like he's goddamn president, but during his time here, he has been, without a doubt, the second best run in Islanders history. They have 5 playoff round wins, and you look at the moves that he's made right off the bat. Robin Leonard and Varley signings in terms of goaltending was fantastic for him. A shit ton of trades like a Palmieri, a Pajot at the deadline, gave up a first round pick, but those weren't rentals. They've been with the club. He doesn't really do a ton of rentals. Romanov, Horvat, he tends to do these deadline or offseason moves and lock up guys. So I think he's honestly won basically every single one of those deals when you look at what those respective picks turned into. In terms of trades, the one that you obviously would like a redo on and would rather fix your cap structure, trade some other guys, is obviously the Devontaes for 2 second-round picks. That is the massive blemish, but I think when looking at Lou Lamoriello's trades, although yes, he has significantly crippled our future, we haven't had a first-round pick and God knows when, I think like 2019. It's been a long ass time. Most of his trades in the end, they have won. They've gotten the better player. And when looking at just the core in general, obviously he has built a team that once they get into the playoffs, they can be very dangerous. Yes, they might not be the most dominant regular season team, but I think Lou Lamoriello on the whole has been a net positive when looking at the different extensions that he signed. Some of them have been bad. Anders Lee is obviously the number one proponent of that. Ryan Pollock's not really playing up to snuff, especially of late. He has like 5 more years at $6 million. But when you look at a Brock Nelson only making $6 million the past like 5 seasons, absolute steal. So I think with Lou Lamoriello, the good far outweighs the bad. They've been a successful team, although they haven't made a Stanley Cup or won a Stanley Cup. It has definitely been a successful tenure for Lou Lamoriello, and they should be a competitive team at least the next 2 to 3 years and maybe do go on another run. Number 2, Danny Briere, one of the newer guys, got the job in the spring of 2023. He got it very recently. I'm going to give him a B+. Really, his number one move has been the Provorov trade. Ended up getting a first and a second round pick as well as Sean Walker just to take on Cal Peterson and get most of Provorov's deal off the books. I think LA's actually retaining the money on that. So that was a fantastic deal, as well as the Kevin Hayes trade, just getting that half of that contract off the books, only paying $3.4 million. Took a big swing on Matvei Michkov, which I absolutely love. I think Oliver Bonk was another solid draft. Scooped up Massimo Rizzo this most recent summer for basically nothing. He's one of the leaders in college hockey in points per game. The Gauthier thing obviously stinks, but he didn't really have much to do with that. He didn't draft Gauthier. Gauthier didn't want to talk to him, so you really can't penalize him for that. And also, obviously now, whatever happens with Carter Hart, you really can't blame Danny Briere. He's been on the job for a year. Whatever happened far before him and was going to happen regardless. Not saying, just with the Carter Hart stuff, whatever happens, not his fault. But overall, Danny Briere's tenure has been pretty successful. I can't give him a fantastic grade because it's only been one year. But right now, I'm going to go with the B+. I think he's done a very good job. Chris Drury, A-. His first 2 moves were like straight up horrible. He traded away Buchnevich for Sammy Blais and a second round pick. Then he signed Barclay Goodrow. But since then, it has been pretty solid. Trocheck, at the time, I thought it was a solid move. It has obviously looked fantastic, especially this season, playing around point per game, only at like a $8.7 million cap hit. That has been a great deal. Jonathan Quick this season has been fantastic. Extended Adam Fox for only $9.5 million. And both of his deadlines that he's had as a general manager 2 years ago, Andrew Kopp was a very good deal for them. He ended up being a very high impact player when they went on the Eastern Conference Finals run. And although last year's moves didn't really work out, I think Tarasenko and Kane for a first and a second round pick was aggressive and was very solid value for the New York Rangers. So when looking at Chris Drury, he didn't really build the core, but in terms of making moves beyond that Barclay Goodrow deal, most of it, he had to trade Buchnevich, obviously didn't get that good of a return, but when looking at it since the Goodrow deal, since that offseason, he has been very good for the New York Rangers. Gustafsson this offseason, fantastic veteran league minimum for a defenseman. He's been great for them, so I really like what Chris Drury is doing in New York. Fourth to go is Don Waddell. Don Waddell has been there since 2018. He's been there for a while. Obviously, him and Rod Brindamore came in at the exact same time. I'm not sure if it was a hire by him. If so, fantastic hire. But looking at it, right off the bat, drafted Andrei Svechnikov, which was kind of like the consensus second overall pick. But still, that ended up being, for the most part, the right decision. Quinn Hughes, better player, but they weren't going to take him at second overall. Hindsight's 2020. The Hanifin, Lindholm for Hamilton and Adam Fox deal, I think that was a fantastic deal. Obviously, Adam Fox ended up wanting out, got 2 second-round picks for him for a guy that wasn't going to play for them. That's another solid deal, even though they technically lost that. Given the situation, they had no leverage. But the Dougie Hamilton trade, Dougie Hamilton definitely was the best player of that deal. You can argue Hanifin and Lindholm together maybe were better, but Hamilton, for his 3 years in Carolina, was absolutely fantastic. Some other deals, he ended up dumping Jeff Skinner for picks that became Alexander Nikishin and Peter Kochetkov. Kochetkov might be the goalie of the future. Alexander Nikishin is one of the best defensemen in the entire KHL and is only 21 or 22. So dumped Skinner instead of giving him this big, massive deal, which has looked much better, especially late of Buffalo, but didn't really fit with Carolina's timeline. Traded Victor Rask for Nino Niederreiter. That was a good deal. Took on Patrick Marleau's contract from the Toronto Maple Leafs. People forget about that. That pick ended up, the first round that they got, ended up being Seth Jarvis. So he was very proactive and realized, the Leafs aren't that good this year. Let me take on Patrick Marleau just to get a first round goddamn pick. That was fantastic. He dumped Nedeljkovic back when we all thought this guy was going to be their franchise goaltender. He said, nah, shipped them to Detroit for a third round pick. We thought that he was absolutely insane for that. Tony DeAngelo, they got him on the league minimum after Dougie Hamilton left in free agency. We thought that was ridiculous. Tony DeAngelo ended up having 51 points in 64 games, dumped Tony DeAngelo's rights for a second, third, and fourth round pick to the Flyers, only to eventually get Tony DeAngelo back. The Burns trade was very good. Traded basically a third round pick, got him 33% retained for only $5.3 million. Of late, it has not been as good. Pacioretty deal definitely blew up in his face. Orlov signing has not been good. Bunting's has been pretty solid, as well as the extensions that he's have signed has been pretty good. Got Aho initially on a 5-year, $8.4 million contract, then an 8-year, $9.75. Svechnikov's deal is looking very solid, 8 years, $7.75. Freddie Anderson, the first deal that they signed with him, turned out to be very good. Drafting-wise, has been pretty solid. Overall, I am going to go with an A- for Don Waddell. I can't quite give him an A, as they haven't made the Stanley Cup and they've basically been highly competitive since he got there. I think he needs to be more aggressive at this year's deadline. That's the one thing that I would criticize him for. He's never really went for it in a given year, and as a result, the Canes 2 Eastern Conference Finals, but no Stanley Cup Finals appearance quite yet. Number 4. Jarmo Kekalainen, I'm going to give him a B. This is tough because it's not easy to win in Columbus. Like it's definitely not easy. He has made the playoffs 5 out of 11 seasons, only has 1 playoff win. So from a macro standpoint, if he was the New York Rangers general manager, that is not a successful run, but considering he is in Columbus, it is a little bit hard. When looking at it, some of his worst deals, he swapped Nathan Horton for David Clarkson. They ended up having to trade him to Vegas for a first and a second round pick. There was, of course, the Panarin deal, which was a positive. That's probably the best move or second best move that he's ever made in terms of just basically trading Brendan Saad for Artemi Panarin. 3 years of Artemi Panarin playing at an extremely high level. Another great move from Kekalainen's era was the Seth Jones deal. Basically got Juracek and Sillinger for Seth Jones instead of paying him this massive contract. There was the 2019 run where they did give up a shit ton of assets. They did end up winning a playoff series, but they gave 2 first-round picks up for Matt Duchene. Didn't really work out all that well. And Ryan Dzingel, traded 2 second-round picks in order to get him. That was kind of a disaster. He only had 1 point in 9 playoff games. When looking also at some other moves, the PLD for Line A deal was pretty solid. I think they actually won that when looking at that, considering PLD did not want to be there, and then they ended up just getting Line A, who looks like he signed obviously long-term. Not the best extension, 4 years, $8.7 million, but he's obviously there compared to Line A that wanted out yet again. And of late, it hasn't been that good, but they still are drafting pretty solid. Again, going back to it, Juracek, Matachuk, Fantilli, Sillinger, not having the best year after his rookie year, the following 2 years, but is still looking like a promising guy. But of late, they have kind of swung and missed on some guys. Gaudreau contract was another shit show as of right now. Eric Goodbranson was bad. Severson is not looking that good in his first year of an 8-year deal at $6.25 million. And Provorov deal, they probably shouldn't have given up a bunch of assets to get Ivan Provorov. So in looking at Kekalainen, I think overall his tenure has been solid, but I'm not sure that he's the guy going forward to eventually put it together. They have a good piece, a good core right now, but I'm not sure that he's the guy that's going to take them to the next level, because basically all of his win now moves the past 18, 20 months have been kind of flops, especially of late. Up next, Tom Fitzgerald. B+ for Tom Fitzgerald. Actually, A- for Tom Fitzgerald. I'll be nicer. When you look at Fitzgerald, what he inherited Ray Shero, who kind of just like blew up the team. Yes, he did draft Heischer and Hughes, but the team was not in a good spot. There was the weird situation where they made the playoffs with Taylor Hall. They thought that they were better than they actually were. Then they sucked the following year. But when looking at what he's done, it has been very impressive. His drafting record of drafting Holtz, who is really developing now, Luke Hughes in 2021. People thought that was just a nepotism pick. Luke Hughes is obviously a baller. Simone Nemec and Seamus Casey in 2022. Those were all very good picks by Tom Fitzgerald and has really revitalized the New Jersey Devils' young core. Yes, he didn't really address a goaltender this most recent summer. And yes, the Timo Meier deal is looking pretty bad. He would be maybe even an A-, or he would be an A if it wasn't for the Meier and the goaltending problems this year and the fact that they're just struggling in general. And he seems to not be willing to fire Lindy Ruff. But there is no doubt since he got there in 2020, the franchise is in a far, far better situation now than when they were under Ray Shero. Even if they missed the playoffs this year, they are still in a far better situation. Next up, Kyle Dubas, second to last. Kyle Dubas, I'm going to go with the B-. I know I might get some hate for this. People absolutely love Kyle Dubas. First off, the Riley Smith trade that he made at the draft last year, not looking that good. He has a $5 million cap hit this year and next year. Started out very good for the Penguins. I think he had like 9 points in his first 9 games. He has 2 goals, 7 assists for 9 points in his last 32 games. He's 32 years old and has a year left at $5 million. That deal has kind of been an absolute dud. Gave up only a 3rd-round pick for that, but still, he's not even been worth his $5 million cap hit. The Graves, 6-year, $4.5 million contract. He's either 26, 27, or 28. Yes, he's a defensive defenseman, but I don't even think he's been that good defensively and obviously offers nothing offensively. I'm not a fan of that deal. Lars Zellers was a pretty decent scoop at 2 years, 2.5. Doesn't do much offensively, but is a very good bottom 6 forward. Noel Acciari, that deal is looking very bad. 3 years, $2 million, 4 points in 36 games. It has not been good defensively. The underlying numbers suggest that. And the Carlson trade. The Carlson trade obviously was the massive one back in August. Not saying it's horrible. Carlson is playing pretty solid. I'd say he's been about an $8 million, maybe $9 million player. But the fact they didn't get him retained that much, he's still a $10 million cap hit. The next 3 seasons after this, it's not even like there's this year and then next year or just this year. They still have to give him $10 million against the cap the next 3 seasons. So even right now, again, I don't think that he's a $10 million defenseman, 33 points in 44 games. The defensive analytics have improved, but they gave up a first-round pick that now they can't use at the deadline to potentially go on a playoff push. So I'm not a fan of the Erik Karlsson deal. And then Nedeljkovic and Jarry, those were both very good deals that they signed. Obviously, Nedeljkovic only for like $1.5 million. He's been playing far better. Jarry is getting back to Jarry 2 years ago and is only making around $5.5 million. So Kyle Dubas, I'm kind of disappointed. I think he missed, obviously, on Acciari, Smith, and Karlsson to a degree. Those were his 3 kind of big moves. Tristan Jarry was always going to kind of re-sign with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So in looking at him, obviously it's early. but I have been disappointed in what he did in his first season. And it's not like he has a ton of money to play with this offseason because he spent most of it last offseason. So when looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins, I'm very disappointed in Kyle Dubas' tenure as of right now. And lastly, we got the fattest one for last. Brian MacLellan has been there since 2014. He inherited the team. I'm going to give him an A, by the way. He won the Stanley Cup, obviously, so he gets a little cup bump. But when looking at Brian MacLellan, he inherited the team in 2014. This team had not made the playoffs the previous year, as well as just barely getting in the playoffs the prior 2 years. They were on 97-point pace during the lockout season in 2013, and 92 points just barely got in 2 years ago. So when looking at it, they were not falling off. They still had their core pieces. But Brian MacLellan, what does he do? He goes out and he trades for a TJ Oshie in 2015, gives up Troy Bauer and Phoenix Copley, and got one of his key forwards that would eventually be on that Stanley Cup winning team, would go on to win back-to-back President's trophies. Trades for Lars Eller back when Lars Eller was like an elite third-line center, second-line center. Traded for him for only 2 second-round picks. Went out and got the Shattenkirk deal done. Yes, it didn't work out in that 2017 season, but I do like the aggressiveness from that. And when looking at it, obviously won that Stanley Cup in 2019, put all the pieces together with a couple of very good free agency signings. When looking at that, it has gotten a little bit bad of late. He's had some solid deals, like when he signed Dylan Strome for only 1 year, $3.5 million. But he did trade for Anthony Mantha, even though Verana hasn't been as much better than that. Honestly, probably even worse. Mantha has been playing decent of late. But when looking at it, traded away Burakovsky, traded away Stevenson for pretty cheap. Vanacek didn't really work out for them. Obviously, had to trade him. Kemper, not looking that good. So it hasn't been that good of late, but considering the run that they went on from 2015 basically till 2021, were arguably the best team in the entire regular season and got that Stanley Cup, I think you have to respect that. In last year at the deadline, he did make some solid deals. Obviously, the Orlov trade, got a first-round pick for that. Eric Gustafsson got Rasmus Sandin for that. So they're going through kind of this interesting retool, and I think he's drafted very good of late with a guy like, especially last draft with Ryan Leonard and Andrew Crystal. So I think they're going to have to go through this retool just because they were competitive from 2008 to like 2021 for the most part. So it is a little bit weird of a situation where I can't really blame, although MacLellan's moves haven't been great of late. It's also just Ovechkin has gotten old. Backstrom, his hip just stopped working, and he was making $9.2 million. And when looking at some of the extensions that he did sign, yes, Kuznetsov wasn't that good. Carlson's extension has been fantastic. 8 years, $8 million. Since like 2018, he's been well worth that. Backstrom's kind of fell apart. Ovechkin's still okay, considering what he brought in prior years. He only has 2 years left after this. Wilson, he got for 6 years of $5.1 million. That obviously ends this year. That was fantastic. So when looking at Brian MacLellan, I'm going to give him an A just because obviously won that Stanley Cup. TJ Oshie trade was one of the best trades of the mid-2010s, so I think that was a pretty good deal. Looking at it now, overall, A-, B+, A-, A-, B, A-, a lot of A-, B-, and an A. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? This was still almost 20 minutes, and I'll be doing the Atlantic next time, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.